Hello, and welcome to the Culture Cave. My name's Anthony James, and that's Emmett. Say hi to the people, Emmett.
Hi, everybody. I've missed you. I took a bit of a time to recover myself, and now I'm back to annoy you all about Marvel knowledge.
A sabbatical, a sabbatical. Okay, so all right, guys, what are we doing here? We're making a video about the Eternals weeks after it came out. This is not going to get YouTube clicks. We know that, but we have some stuff to say about it, and I sort of want to talk about, first of all, Emmett. The dust has settled. When this film first came out, or even before it came out, there was like rumblings before it came out that this was like critics were panning it, and it was going to be crap and everything like this, because it was the fan base was quite excited for it. I was very excited for it, and then all of a sudden the critics start coming out, start saying it's crap. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 47% tomato meter, 5.6 out of 10 rating by the critics, but it has an 80% score from the audience. So actually, the audience seems to like it more than the critics did. My question to you is, Emmett, now that the dust has settled a fair bit on the Eternals, where do you think it stands? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was as good as other Marvel films? Do you think it will be remembered as a crap one? What do you think?
So I'm more in the score of people who deeply enjoyed the film for what I think it was, rather than what I think a lot of people wanted it to be. I think a lot of people went into it expecting just like a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the biggest stumbling block is, from like expectations versus reality.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Eternals is much more of like a sci-fi movie with superhero elements to it.
Yeah.
Because like it does that sort of classic sort of sci-fi start off thing with like a title crawl,
Yeah, that's
sort of
cool.
giving you sort of the backstory, and like it's very like sort of space operatic at times, and
Yes.
like with the Celestials and such, and like I find it very interesting for what it wanted to be, rather than what I think maybe a lot of people wanted to see from the Eternals. Because
Yeah.
like we all like our Marvel movies. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of them fall into like a comfortable area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You usually know what you're going to get when you go into a Marvel movie. And I think Eternals fell slightly outside of that and sort of shocked a lot of people on that front, and that's possibly where some of the disconnect came from.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think, yeah, I did enjoy it. I'm gonna say I think you're right in saying that it's not the same as other Marvel movies. It didn't feel the same. It didn't feel the same in terms of the way that they introduce characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. I mean, this is a whole team. And to be honest with you, it kind of makes me worried for the like Fantastic Four and stuff, because this is a whole team they're introducing, and the introduction of the characters wasn't as good as, say, like an Iron Man or a Thor, like where they're just introducing one at a time. This was a whole group. I did enjoy the dynamics overall, but I think it left, because there was so many of them, it left each one a little two-dimensional. But there was one
Yeah.
or two that stood out, obviously, but it did leave a little bit of two-dimensionality there. But overall, I actually really enjoyed it. I like this. You said it was like a space opera. I agree. I loved like the aspects of like being pulled in to talk to the Celestial, and like right in front of its face, and for a split second I'm like, what is this, like a lava wall? Oh no, that's its
Yeah.
eye.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I don't, and guys, in the second half of this video, Emmett's going to sort of have a little chat with us about the comic run of the Eternals and the history on that, so it'll sort of educate me anyway, if not you. And I'm looking forward to hearing about that, because I'm intrigued on the idea. I think I said to you before we started recording, I enjoyed the film. I think it wasn't my favorite Marvel film, but I enjoyed it. I like the style of it. The visuals were amazing, but I'm more excited about where this sort of world that they're building in terms of the Eternals is going. You know?
Yeah, no, it's like I completely understand. Obviously, there is that complaint that some of the characters aren't able to develop as much. You kind of with it's a 3 hour long film, but
Mm-hmm.
like with a cast that big, you have to sort of pick and choose who gets like full development
Yeah.
in what story. My hope slash my assumption would be that we will get more development for the other characters in later films.
Yeah.
We'll see
Mm-hmm.
them focused on, but like this film is definitely like Cersei and Icarus's film. Like they're the two main.
Fina was like the subplot, wasn't she? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. She was the sort of like the subplot that was sort of tied in, because Angelina Jolie is a very good actress, and like everyone else did get varying levels of like character stuff to do, but definitely the story is most about like the sort of three of them, and like their journeys and stuff like that, which is quite interesting. And like I really love the actress who plays Cersei, Gemma Chan. If anyone hasn't seen Humans, the Channel 4 show about sort of like robot helpers that sort of gain a bit of sentience, definitely worth a watch. She's great in that. Okay. She plays another artificial human tied with the color green. How can you be that typecast, I wonder? You know, these are yeah, but she's really good in that. So when and I was happy to see her in Captain Marvel as Minerva, and then when I heard that she was actually going to get to play a big main character and that the film was going to be about her,
yeah,
I
that's
was
interesting, isn't it? Like she's been two characters with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I suppose because she was blue or something in the other one, so therefore it's sort of she was an alien. It's sort of it doesn't ruin anything that she's two people. But that is interesting though. Is she like is she the only person to play two?
No, she's not even the only person to play two in this film. There's a second person who plays two Marvel characters, though you can debate whether that one is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay.
Patton Oswalt plays MODOK in the MODOK show. Also plays Pip the Troll at the first end credit sequence. So we have someone already who plays two Marvel characters in this movie as well, which is very fun from my side. But I think there have been one or two and actually, sorry, there's a third person who has played more than one character in the Marvel universe in this film. In the final post-credit scene, we don't see them, but we hear their voice. I can't remember the actor's name.
I think it's this big spoilers, obviously, but spoilers turn off. I think it was Blade's voice, was it?
Yes, it's Blade's voice, but that actor, Mashali Ali, was that his name? I'll need to double check what his name is. I'm terrible with names. He also played Cottonmouth in Luke Cage during season 1. So right. just in Eternals, we have 3 people who have played previous characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe appearing. So that's just a fun behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, you've just completely exposed my lack of knowledge there. But yeah, I think it's interesting that she's in it. I think she did really well. I liked it. I think it's interesting that she's called Cersei and her love interest is
Icarus.
Icarus, but also
sorry. From Whitman.
Yeah, from Game of Thrones, Kit Harington, because Cersei's a character in Game of Thrones, Emmett. But yeah, so it was interesting there. I want to talk a little bit because we're going to move on to the thing in a minute, but there's a few characters I wanted to point out that I thought were really interesting. The idea of Sprite being made into a child, I suppose, was interesting to me. What I found was funny was they referenced her being like Tinkerbell, like in love with Peter Pan. But the hilarious thing is the costume and the hairstyle and everything of her, I was just thinking to myself, she looks like Peter Pan. Like she looks like how Peter Pan's played by a girl in the Panto. That's what she looked. She looked like someone playing Peter Pan to me. As well as that, Kumail Nanjiani did a really good job. Yeah, he did a really good job, and I really want to make a special mention of the actor Harish Patel. His little sort of like. The Alfred to his Batman, so to speak, how they mentioned that a few times. He was the comic relief for this film, and I found him absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I feel like the recent Marvel movies have got much better with their comic relief characters. Like, they're not as obnoxious. There was him, and in Shang-Chi, I can't remember the character's name right now, but his love interest / best friend.
Awkwafina is the actress.
Awkwafina. Awkwafina. She was really good. Because oftentimes in a lot of films, the comic relief becomes one of the more frustrating characters because they're oftentimes trying to be funny and maybe not landing it. But Awkwafina and what was the name of the actor for this?
Harish Patel.
Harish Patel, they're both so charming and so funny in such natural ways that they're just very engaging on that front. And I was very sad that he didn't get to be around to witness the end battle. I was like, I would love to catch up with him and see what he thought about this big battle,
Yeah, it's really interesting, as well, they're bringing in aspects like he's filming it for Kumail Nanjiani's character to sort of make a documentary because he's been this big film star in India for all these years. And I think it's so funny that every time that he, my favorite joke of his comic relief was every single time that his camera got broken, he had another one. He had a
new one that was slightly less quality. Yeah. He just had eventually he was going to come out with like a disposable camera where he had to wind up and like snap it like that. You know?
Yeah, it was actually unbelievable. I was very happy, Emmett, I will say, very, very happy that Druid, played by Barry Keoghan, was not the bad guy. Because the trailers were really making it out that he was going to be the bad guy. And the fact that he's going to stay in the series and he has basically come around to being a good guy, I really like that about him. I wasn't expecting that. They zigged when I thought they were going to zag, you know?
Well, they 100% were doing that to mess with, because in the comics, Drake is 100% a bad dude, like just like out and out, like it's in his nature. Because like the Eternals are sort of made in that way, and it's sort of referenced in the film where like they're programmed in very certain ways to have very certain personality types. And his like in the comics, he describes himself as a snake. Like, oh, I am designed to be a snake, so therefore I will always be a snake. If you know what I mean, I will always betray people and turn on them. So like they were definitely playing on the comic book assumption that he would be a bad guy and that he like looks like Loki and those sort of characters, and like he messes with people's minds. So yes, I very much enjoyed where they zigged where we expected them to zag, and I especially love the big reveal of this film, the biggest zag that we got Icarus turning to the dark side. And like usually like because it's a storyline that gets overdone in a lot of things, the evil version of Superman, like, you know, what if Superman but was evil. But this version of that I find very engaging, because like he still was like a moral character in the sense of he wasn't doing it just to hurt people. Like he was doing what he believed to be right.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like the Homelander take on an evil Superman. The Homelander take on an evil Superman is just, let's make him the biggest dickhead in the world. Whereas this one was, you could still see he was following a moral code, you know.
Like you could almost sympathize with him, but in the sense of like Patel's character says, where it's like, I think you should save the world, though I'm human, so I'm a little biased. You know, like he makes that joke. So like you sympathize with him to a certain extent, and the fact that like you know, in the comics he is just sort of like a heroic character. Like he doesn't have that sort of heel turn. So like it was very surprising from like a comic book standpoint as well. I really loved it because like, one, he's incredibly powerful, so he makes a great physical threat for the other Eternals to have to face, and like it's such a great little encapsulation of like of Cersei's character arc of having to like stand up and become like the leader by like facing the person that everyone else sort of wanted to be the leader, and like the person that everyone just naturally turns to, you know. So it was I love that bit. It was very cool, and somehow Marvel managed to do a cooler version of the Justice League fight Superman than the actual Justice League film. You know, it's basically got that vibe of like when Superman's sort of confused and fights the rest of the league. But like, it's the actual like conclusion of the film. It's the climax of it.
Yeah,
you know,
they did that in the Justice League. They did that in Justice League just as he woke up, didn't they? Like that could have been a whole storyline for a Justice League film, Superman versus them. But no, they just threw that away.
And like the murder mystery aspect with like Icarus, and the fact that like I watched it a second time there just yesterday, but like if you know the twist going into it, there's little moments that you pick up on where like, you know, it gives you sort of little hints that he maybe like knows like more than he's letting on. Like for example, like when they find Ajax's body, Sprite and Cersei are like really distraught and like looking at the body, whereas he is looking around like as though he's like looking for a threat, but it also could be read as him not wanting to look at the body out of like guilt, because it's like he feels responsible. And also the fact that he's not like emotionally reacting / surprised or distraught, it's because he already knows, like he put the body there, he knows
of course
that happened. So there's a lot of like little bits and bobs.
Return to the scene of the crime, although actually that technically that wasn't the scene of the crime, I suppose, but yeah,
it's the scene where he jumped the body, you know.
He did, but overall I thought this was pretty good. You know, I like the I like the zigs and zags of it. I liked how they moved through the time. I like how they sort of they encapsulated the big sort of heroes of the past, or like the gods, I suppose, like the Athena, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what the point of not calling her
I,
Athena is, to be honest with you.
it's just because she's called Athena in the comics, so they
Yeah.
keep it that way. But like, I did love that as like a thing where it's like, oh, these characters are like, obviously as their name implies, immortal and eternal, and like because they've been heroes in the background for years, they're like the inspiration for like all these different mythologies.
Yeah.
Takes on gods and stuff like that. I love that little bit of aspect of that. So good.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really cool, and obviously the Icarus ending up in the sun was very obvious. But we'll let him away with it. We'll let him away with it.
It was obvious in the sense of like it's his name, he's going to end up there. But at the same time, it was like it was done in a way where it was tragic and like you still felt like bad upon watching it happen.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there we go. All right, okay. Well, Emmett. Now we are going to move into the phase of the video where you are going to educate me and everyone else about the Eternals. So you've been thinking about this. You went to see it for a second time. Tell me about the Eternals' history, Emmett. I want to know. I really do.
Sure. Well, to talk about the Eternals' history, we're going to have to talk about a man who is often brought up in the same breath as Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, who is one of those people who've been like involved in the creation of a lot of our sort of key favorite characters in sort of Marvel knowledge and stuff like that. So like characters like Thor, etc. So he was oftentimes the artist and part writer because back in the day of the early days of Marvel, they had a very unique way of doing comic books referred to as the sort of Marvel method, which sort of relied on the artist a little bit more. So in modern day, and Marvel follows this process now as well. Then what will happen is the writer will come up with the script, generally figure out how the panels and the pacing will sort of happen within pages, and sort of hand that off to an artist who will create that, and they'll go back and forth. The Marvel method of like the early days of Marvel was more the writer would come up with a general sort of idea / script, give it to the artist who would then sort of help fill in plot details and like decide the pacing of how the comic would go on like the panels and how it was all sort of written. And then the writer would come back in and finish up scripting it. So it was a much more like heavily laid on the artist sort of perspective on creation for Marvel. So you could almost argue that like Jack Kirby had like a greater influence on the beginnings of a lot of Marvel characters than Stan Lee did. Stan Lee, sort of handled scripts and was a very good salesman, which I'll come back to in a little bit, man. He knew how to take a product and like take it to the market and find an audience for it. Like that was his, like that's how he made Marvel into what it was. He was very good at that, very personable. Whereas Jack Kirby was more of a I think he would describe himself as curmudgeon-y and like, a little bit distant from people. The character that Jack Kirby says that he feels he relates most to, I think is very telling. He relates most to the Thing out of the Fantastic Four. Right. So a big rocky dude with a thick, exterior who doesn't like to let people in. So I think that sort of informs a lot of how he works. But Jack Kirby, for his whole career, was sort of obsessed with the idea of the Eternals, not specifically in the Eternals that we know, but the idea of like a new set of gods, like a new pantheon arising, these powerful, distant, but like incredibly, long-lived creatures who had sort of watched human history. And were sort of incredibly powerful. And like he had attempted to make what is the Eternals several times.
Oh, really?
The original, it's very interesting. So you can go back through Jack Kirby's like creative history, and you can see sort of prototypes to the Eternals, including the Inhumans. The Inhumans were a similar sort of thing that he created within the Fantastic Four. A secret society of incredibly powerful people who live out in the mountains and sort of observe humanity without being involved. And like a recurring thing that we will see in Jack Kirby's publication history is the fact that like he wanted to make this, but he didn't know how to sell it to people. Like he didn't know how to sell it to an audience, and he didn't know how to sell it to like a comic company, which meant that the books often didn't do very well and then were eventually cancelled before they could be expanded in the way that he wanted. Or that editorial, because that's a big issue with comics, between like if a comic isn't selling well, editorial will try and get in there and like mess with things around, and that would sort of interfere with what Jack Kirby wanted to do, and that would often make him want to leave the books because again he didn't like people sort of sticking their fingers where he didn't want it.
Yeah.
But like the history of Eternals from a publication standpoint, this will be very interesting because they do reference him. The Eternals was originally supposed to be sort of a sequel to Thor, in the sense of like, the mythological idea of Ragnarok.
Yeah.
What Jack Kirby wanted to do was have Ragnarok happen, have Thor and all those characters died, and then have them sort of reincarnated into like new forms, like becoming a new set of gods.
Oh, yeah.
So like different from Thor and all that. Like, he wanted to go that way, but obviously Thor was still a popular character in his day, not maybe to the same degree that he is now. But so they didn't want to get rid of that, that IP, that intellectual property. So they kind of nixed that. So then Jack Kirby ended up leaving Marvel for a bit and going to DC to try and make his New Gods, which he did in its series titled New Gods. And he created a lot of characters for that, including one that a lot of DC fans will be very aware of, Darkseid, the guy that was being set up to be like the big overall bad guy of the DC cinematic universe.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Justice League. Yeah.
Justice League. the sort of the Thanos in the back, even though he came before Thanos in the comics. So like he helped create that, and he created a whole pantheon of literal new gods that lived on this world, and then there was the dark side sort of side of things that they lived on Apocalypse. So like he created that, but that series only lasted about 12 issues because as Jack Kirby will admit, like I mentioned before, he needed someone like Stan Lee to help him sell books, because he didn't know how to do that. Like, that was not a skill that he had. He just wanted to create what he wanted to create. He needed someone who could find the audience. So New Gods didn't actually do that particularly well, and when DC tried to like get too involved with the process, he left and returned to Marvel, where he eventually then created the Eternals. And the Eternals was pretty much a him-only a him-only comic, which is why at the very end, like usually you'll see at the end of Marvel movies, they'll thank Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
In this film, they only thank Jack Kirby because the Eternals is 100% his, basically.
Oh, cool.
Those are his creations. And I also think that this is one of the few Marvel films, that doesn't have a Stan Lee cameo for that reason. Like, not even like something in the background, like an image of Stan Lee or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So like, I think that's part of the reason that he doesn't appear, because it is a Jack Kirby.
It also makes sense to me why there was so much DC references in the film, because in the film they reference Batman, reference Alfred,
Superman,
reference Superman. It makes sense now, knowing that originally his idea went to DC kind of thing with New Gods. That makes sense now why, because I honestly was a bit like, well, hang on, what's going on here? Why are we referencing DC? Not that I care too much, but I'm like, so you're telling me that in this world where there has been like superheroes, people still care about like, why are they talking about Batman and Superman? You have Iron Man and Captain America in real life. Why the fuck do you care about fictional ones? That's one thing I didn't like about I didn't like that part of the film, but now it makes sense to me why they would reference DC.
Yeah, no, it's definitely sort of encoded in there to a certain extent, and like Icarus is very much designed as a Superman-esque character. Yeah. But yeah, no, again, that and unfortunately, Eternals did not last particularly long as well. Again, because he probably wasn't working with Stan at all during this time, because they had a bit of a fraught relationship, and again, it struggled to sort of find its mark. But it's so interesting to me that like this idea of like these sort of like a new pantheon of like godly beings was so like in Jack Kirby's work bibliography. It was something that he wanted to create so often. They ended up creating several pantheons of different gods for like, but like it never quite got as far as he wanted it to. But and it's very interesting when we get to talk about then Eternals as a film, because like I sort of mentioned earlier, I think it wasn't sold well to like the audience. Like, it wasn't explained in a way that sold the film well, which is oddly like sort of like, that's perfect for the Eternals. That's their history. No one knows how to sell the Eternals, and of course that and then it sort of rubs up against the audience in the wrong way because they don't know how to sell it. Like, that's Eternals in a nutshell from its publication history. And like, that's what happened with the film as well. And I feel like the film plays with a lot of the stuff that was sort of integral to Jack Kirby's like idea of like these these mythological figures that help to inspire or influence humanity, and like in mythology that we see in these characters like Icarus, Cersei, Sprite, and all these ones. And it's just, I feel like it's even though they changed the a lot of people's moral alignments in this film,
Yeah.
I feel like it's very authentic and close to the spirit of what the Eternals is. I think
Okay.
that's kind of where it sort of connected with me, in the sense of like it has a lot of the same ideas as the actual comic itself, but like has changed things up in a way that is, Chloe Zhao, like her, her film, she's made it her own through her own interpretation of it, but has still stayed loyal to like the ideas that were sort of brought up in the original comic. It's one of the most interesting adaptations to my mind of a Marvel property, because again, Eternals is such a beast to
Yeah.
sort of adapt, and that's what has definitely sort of fascinated me about this, because like Eternals, sort of like the Inhumans, is a very hard property to adapt. It's very hard to sell to a general audience, and the fact that this film is, in my mind, very, very good. I really loved it. I'm part of the like minority that like I'm super into this film. So like, for me, it's kind of great. Like this film and the recent run of Eternals and Marvel Comics have actually. I've been a big Marvel fan for like almost 20 years at this stage. I have never cared about the Eternals, but the recent comic series and this film have made me give a shit about the Eternals, which I think is like a big deal, because they were, again, much like I've said before, they're a hard sell. Like,
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
hard to get people invested in, and like, that's
Well,
the
yeah.
history of the Eternals
Okay.
from a
Well,
publication
thank you
standpoint.
very much. That was amazing. I do. I'm gonna be honest with you. I did like the film. I did. But I think because it's a Marvel Cinematic Universe, you inevitably start comparing it to the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I don't. If I'm just gonna look at it on its own as a film, I think it was good, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do next, and even some of like the cameos and stuff we had in the post credit scenes. I'm really excited about that. Eros, for example, Thanos' brother. Really excited about where that's going to go. I love the idea of one day some of these Eternals being just randomly in the, like one is hanging about with the Guardians of the Galaxy, or one is hanging about with the Avengers. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing where these characters go and how they filter into the world. I think it's really cool that the world has now a massive celestial hanging out of the ocean. I think that's really cool. You know,
just like this in the ground.
yeah, like, yeah, exactly. Like a tombstone, erected to memorialize the abortion of a of a celestial. So I think that's really cool. There's a lot in this film that I like. We didn't even mention them, but like the bad guys, what are they called again? The delinquents or something?
The Deviants. I like the
Yeah.
delinquents though.
Yeah. The delinquents, yeah. But the
That's
deviants, yeah. I thought that was really
yeah.
cool. I like that he gained like proper sentience. I honestly was really hoping. Like, I think the deviants, now he's gone now. He was killed. But I honestly thought to myself, "Oh my god, like this deviant guy could be like like obviously no, maybe comic book fans are going to laugh at me, but I was like, this guy could be like the next Thanos. Like, this guy could go away and then over a number of films gain more and more and more powers, and he could eventually be like unstoppable. And then they just killed him. But I thought that was I think there was so much that could be done with him.
Yeah, it's very interesting because the Deviants are, again, a recurring thing in like Jack Kirby lore of like having like a second race of like new gods, almost like new demons or
Yeah.
new devils, where it's like this other race of people that are like dangerous. In the comics, the Deviants are a lot more complex in the sense of like a lot of them are still evil, but like the Deviants have like a full society, and like they have like they are super populous, and like they have their own, they live in the city of Lemuria, one of the lost like cities that have sunk beneath the waves, and like the guy that we've seen there, Crew, I think his name is like the leader, or like the king of the Deviants, or their prime minister, or whatever their legal system is
All
at
right,
the moment.
so they actually kind of completely changed the deviants in a way then.
I understand why they had to. Like, there's so much stuff to get into with the Eternals that like trying to introduce a whole second complex race in that 3 hours would have been like nigh impossible. But a very
Yeah.
interesting and funny bit in the comics. So Thena, who killed crew in that in the film.
Yeah.
They were romantically involved in the comics. Thena has had a long-term on and off again relationship with that dude, and
Oh
also
my
other
god.
deviants, which is very, very funny. You
Well,
know,
because it wasn't Thanos half deviant as well? Like he was like sort of spliced together, eternal deviant.
yeah, he's a complex. So like the Eternals, the comic lore of the Eternals gets really into it because like part of the reason that they're called Eternals is if they die, they just get resurrected. They get like a new body,
Right.
which is a big difference in the comics. But like they don't have like procreation in the same way that we do because of that. Like they are created, and like Eternals are sort of banned from procreating in that way.
Okay.
And Thanos is like the one one Eternal who went to live on Titan, basically left to do experiments about having a naturally born child, and Thanos was the result of that. Thanos
Crazy.
was like, yeah, so it's like they broke the one of the biggest rules of Eternal law, and Thanos was the creation from that, which is very interesting. You know,
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. I like I like even like we're sort of just rambling at this point, but I kind of
yeah.
like in the Eris scene how they had the little dwarf guy. What's his name?
Pip the troll.
Like the troll. Sorry, I thought he was like a space dwarf. But the idea
Yeah.
of these like little trolls, like it's almost made it feel like a fantasy in space to
Mm.
me. And I'm just like I'm just really looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
They committed much more heavily than like things like Thor have to like
yeah.
the sci-fi and fantasy elements of it, which I appreciate greatly. Like I hope Marvel will be able to take more chances with that sort of stuff, being willing to give us weirder things in the character's history, you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. I agree.
I'm excited for when they sort of appear. Fingers crossed. She is a member in the comics. I'm hoping it happens. But Cersei, I hope Cersei joins the Avengers. I hope that she gets to be the Eternals representative on the team.
Well, that would be
'Cause
that would be cool. Also, we will say just before we go as well. I just realized from Avengers Endgame, Howard the Duck is on Earth, so we could get a Howard the Duck season at the series at some point. But
that'd be fun.
but yeah, he's on Earth. So there we go. We didn't even talk about Kit Harington being Dane, whatever you call him. I'm sure we'll get a chance to
Uh,
talk about him in the future.
Again, I do have some comic recommendations where I can
Oh, cool.
very quickly bring him up. So, like I mentioned, the Eternals as a whole have struggled to sort of have a lot of long-running comics. Basically, Neil Gaiman came back and did a little bit of an Eternals series
Mhm.
where they are on Earth and had their memories sort of suppressed of being Eternals. So it's a good jumping on point. It gets you sort of up to date with the idea of what like the Eternals are,
Yeah.
without being too in depth about it. And you can kind of see how their comic versions differ from the film adaptations of them. But it's quite engaging, and there is a current ongoing Eternals written by one of my personal favorite comic writers, Kieran Gillen. Here is the Cersei alternate cover with
Oh,
that.
cool.
She's looking very good. But it's as I mentioned previously, Eternals, part of the reason for their name in the comics is the fact that they cannot die. They will always be resurrected.
Yeah.
And this series sort of focuses on the dark secret behind their resurrection, how they are always able to come back,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how it ended up like that. And speaking of Dane Whitman, the man
Yes.
himself, he has had his own comic series as the Black Knight.
I knew this.
Wield-
Yes, I knew this. Wielding Excalibur or something.
Wielding the ebony blade. You've seen Athena playing with Excalibur,
Yes, that's what
and
made me think that.
and Sprite asks her if it is the ebony blade, and she's like, "No, it's Excalibur." But
Yeah.
the sword that we see Dane with at the end of the film is the cursed blade, the ebony blade, which is a Marvel universe add-on to Arthurian lore. It's basically a cursed sword that can be used by men and women, I think, of Dane's line. But the sword, unlike Excalibur, will always eventually drive its wielder mad and
Ah.
destroy them. So it's like, imagine if Excalibur was cursed, basically.
Okay, this is really interesting actually now. So
And there's another one.
he's gonna be a big player maybe in this Marvel
Yes.
Cinematic Universe.
And he and Cersei, while they were both on the Avengers together, were in a romantic relationship. So fingers crossed that we will see Cersei and Black Knight fighting on the Avengers together. That would be a lot of fun.
That's really interesting. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that now.
Yeah.
Right, well, there we go, guys. There's the Eternals chat. I think we both agree it was better than the critics made out. The audience score is 80%. I think Emmett likes it a bit more than that. I think 80% is about right for me, to be honest with you. But I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to more. I will do some more research on the Eternals. I very much liked it. Thank you very much, Emmett, as always, for filling us with your knowledge of comic books. I'm sure someone in the comments, if you have anything to add, let us know.
Yeah, I have to get it out somehow or I'll explode. Like there's just too much Marvel knowledge in me. I need to like spew it out. It's
you save me having to read the comics. So like I don't even know where I'd start. So you actually give me you itch to scratch for me, you know what I mean? Scratch the itch.
Yeah. Again, another problem Eternals have. No one knows where the hell to start with them,
Yeah, exactly. Right, well, thanks very much, guys, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.